Sorry I can't be there today. I'm getting my gallbladder removed on Monday, which we found all this out very suddenly this weekend. So I won't be there at least the next couple of days. Monday, Tuesday for sure, probably Wednesday and Thursday, we'll see. But today for Monday, I'm going to try to use this video to finish out the notes and let you get ready for the test. Remember, because the work keys, the test is now definitely this Wednesday. But in the meantime, you're going to finish the notes up. Everything that we started last week with Ford and Carter, all the way to Obama, is where the quiz will cover. So make sure that you get ready for that between now and then. Which Wednesday is the test, whether I'm here or not. So that's still going to happen. Okay, so where pretty much everyone wrapped up on Friday was with the anti-terrorist measures with George W. Bush. And I'm going to try to go through this somewhat quickly so everybody gets it done. Whatever you don't get, I will be posting these videos to Moodle. So if you don't get something in Moodle and you need to hear it again, go check it out on Moodle. You get 2 days to go figure this out, and then you can watch what you need to watch. And then it's just these videos, not all the other notes, but just this will be on Moodle for you to access if necessary. So where we're picking up in the notes is after 9/11 with anti-terrorist measures. Bush had now overwhelming support from Congress because now we're trying to attack these terrorists. And that becomes America's new mission to deal with these foreign threats, to deal with these terrorists abroad and so forth. So he does sign an anti-terrorism bill into law in October 2001, which allows the government to detain anyone suspected of terrorism without a crime for a few days. Or, immigrants. It allows any immigrant who's a foreigner to be detained if they're suspected of terrorism for at least a week, which is a violation of rights, but at the time people felt like it was necessary because it was 9/11. Since then, those things have changed, but for a while there, they could detain these immigrants on suspicion. Three important things you should be aware of as far as these go. And I'm sorry I don't have the PowerPoint in front of me, but you at least have your outline in front of you to help you guide your notes. You're going to have the Department of Homeland Security, so he does make a new cabinet post called the Department of Homeland Security, which does exactly what it sounds. It increases the security of America. Their job is to monitor any terrorist threats. They check emails, they check phone calls, they monitor air flight travel, car travel, whatever you can think of. They monitor all that and try to. They have agents all throughout the country protecting us against terrorist attacks. Probably one of the most visible ways you would see Homeland Security is in the airport with TSA. TSA is the Transportation Security Administration. TSA is the Transportation Security Administration, and that was formed as a result of 9/11. It's now this federal guard program for mostly airports. That's where you're going to see it if you see it anywhere. TSA also falls under Department of Homeland Security, and their job is, like back in the day before 9/11, basically all you do is walk through a metal detector to get through the airport. Now you have these body scanners. They got to check all your liquids, all this different stuff. That's all the job of TSA, but that's not how it had always been. So now Homeland Security and TSA do a lot to check that kind of behavior, especially for air travel because of 9/11. And we'll never know how many terrorist attacks they might have stopped because that's all secretive, but that's their job. And of course, TSA is not just in charge of airports, it's also in charge of other transportation, but mostly airports is where you're going to see them. The third thing that gets created as an anti-terrorist measure was the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. This gives the government a lot of abilities to collect information about you and about people without your permission. It collects information about immigration or about immigrants. It allows the government to search private property without consent, which means they can search maybe your home or even your businesses without the previous amount of consent you had before, or without all the probable cause, because now terrorism is the probable cause, basically. The FBI and also the NSA can also search your phones. They can search your emails and so forth. All that's part of that too. So it basically gives the government a lot of power to do a lot of surveillance as a result. And that's the job of these anti-terrorist measures. The war on terror. So this is the war in Afghanistan. We're not going to war with Afghanistan, but we're going to war with people in Afghanistan. After 9/11, we figured out that the people who attacked us came from Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. So Osama bin Laden led Al-Qaeda. So we send in a coalition force. It's us, other countries from Europe and around the world, send in forces to Afghanistan to go attack the terrorists in Afghanistan. Not the people of Afghanistan, but we go to war with the terrorists in Afghanistan. So this war breaks out in 01-02. We're still fighting Afghanistan today. Again, not fighting the people there, we're fighting the terrorists there. Bush received over 90% approval for his attacks into Afghanistan because they felt like they were very good and very decisive because we're going after these bad guys. We also broke up the Taliban. The Taliban was the government in charge of Afghanistan, but they were also supporting terrorists. So the Taliban was this pro-strict Islamic faith, pro-terrorist organization, and they were giving a lot of money to Al-Qaeda and protecting them. And so we broke up the Taliban within weeks. We fought the terrorists there for a long time. By 2002, Al-Qaeda had been broken up. However, Al-Qaeda forces are still out there. The problem with terrorist groups is that they can go anywhere. They're not just limited to Afghanistan. They can go to Pakistan, they can go to Saudi Arabia or Syria, wherever. So the problem is trying to fight these guys and not trying to go into multiple countries to fight them. But we're still fighting them today in Afghanistan. But most people in general feel like Afghanistan is a necessary war. But now, since it's over 10 years later, people want us to be done with the war no matter what. Even though people were okay initially with Afghanistan overall. And of course, we don't find Osama bin Laden then. We don't find him until about 10 years later. But we will find him eventually. As a result, we do create a democracy in Afghanistan, so we do leave behind democracy in Afghanistan. The first elections were held in 2004. They elected a president there. They still have a president there, and we're trying to, today, still fight against terrorist cells there and help maintain their government, help train their military, and make them a stable government inside of the Middle East. And the operation that we fight there is called Operation Enduring Freedom. So the mission that we have in Afghanistan is called Operation Enduring Freedom. It's still going on right now, essentially, because we're still fighting in Afghanistan. Although Obama is trying to take measures right now to try to get us out in the near future. Okay, so the next issue, which this will be the next slide, this is the war in Iraq. This is the much more controversial war. This war is also over now, but this is the one that was much more controversial. So in 2003, Bush decides to expand this war on terror to a war in Iraq to go after Saddam Hussein. If you recall, Saddam Hussein was who we went after originally in Iraq in 1990 under his dad, and now it's like payback time essentially with W. Bush. After the whole Persian Gulf thing, Saddam Hussein was supposed to allow UN inspectors to come in every year to check to make sure that he wasn't making weapons of mass destruction, because he had been making weapons of mass destruction back in the 80s. They're like biological. So they're supposed to be able to let in every year to make sure that he wasn't doing this. Well, eventually he stops allowing them to come. So the UN asks to come, and he's refusing to let them come. So by the late 90s, they're violating their agreement with the United Nations. Well, Bush thinks that, or at least what Bush is told by the CIA, by the military, and so forth, is that Iraq is potentially helping out terrorist groups. Saddam Hussein might be giving money or even weapons to terrorist groups. So what we're going to try to find in Iraq now is what's called weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs. And this, again, it's not Bush by himself just acting alone. He's been told this by the CIA, been told this by all kinds of different security and intelligence communities. He's been told this by the military that there's weapons of mass destruction inside of Iraq. They're more than likely helping terrorist cells, so we should go in there and take them out, which is what ends up happening. So in March of 2003, because he had not been doing his UN inspections, and because we feel like he might be hailing terrorists, we gave Saddam Hussein 48 hours, saying if you don't resume the inspections and so forth, we're going to invade. So he doesn't do the inspections. So the United Nations, so we invade. So the United Nations did not okay this war, unlike the war in Afghanistan. So we okayed this war in Iraq. So did the British and a few other countries, but not every country. So we go in, the British go in, a few other countries too. But we're going after Saddam Hussein, relieving him of his power, and we're trying to discover any potential WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. Bush also says that he's a part, or Iraq is a part of what he called this axis of evil. This axis of evil, in theory, was Iraq, Iran. We talked about how Iran was a problem, and North Korea, which is still a problem now. As you know, Kim Jong-un there, and that time Kim Jong-il is a big terrorist threat, essentially too, and they're trying to make nuclear warheads as well. So anyway, we all justify us going to Iraq because they weren't doing their UN inspections. We feel like the dictator was being abusive to his people, and that they needed to be intervened with. So we go into Iraq. Within 21 days, we bring down the government in Iraq. Saddam Hussein goes into hiding. By the end of the year, in December of 2003, we find Saddam Hussein. So almost immediately we take out his forces. We take out Saddam Hussein. We find him. When we find him, we give him over to the Iraqi people. They put him on trial and they execute him. So he's executed and tried by his own people. But over the next several years, we're going to try to stabilize. So we win the mission pretty quickly, essentially. But there are a lot of resistance groups and rebel groups who don't like us being there. So the war in Iraq goes on for many more years. Even though we got rid of the government, there's still a lot of resistance groups that still try to fight against us for the next several years. And this war goes on until 2011, essentially. So we never found weapons of mass destruction, although that's what Bush was told was there. So that was never found exactly, at least the way they thought they did. They found some evidence that could have suggested there might have one time been some weapons, but we never found what we thought that was there. Critics were upset because that was the whole basis of the war. So as the war goes on, people got upset. Well, we never found WMDs. That was the whole reason why we went to war in the first place. That really upset a lot of people. Even though Bush, again, it's not Bush's 100% fault. Bush had to go there because of what he was told by the CIA and by the military. Also, Congress, as you remember from the War Powers Act, Congress had to approve them being there longer than 90 days. So, it wasn't just Bush who did this. It was many people in general. Also, we never proved any kind of connection to Al-Qaeda. So we never proved any kind of connection between Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government helping terrorist groups. And that was never proven either. So at the very least, we did say, well, we did remove this guy who was killing his own people from power. So Saddam Hussein was removed from power and held accountable. So that was one thing that happens. We do install a democratic government. We do help create greater freedoms in Iraq and so forth. But I guess at what cost? Because a lot of soldiers did die there and fought there, and they thought it was not a good war to be involved in. We've since left Iraq, and we're going to get to that later on, but we've since left Iraq, and that's one of the reasons why ISIS has popped up in Iraq and Syria, because we're not there anymore, and it led to this destabilization, which led to these extremists taking over parts of Syria and Iraq called ISIS. Okay, you don't need to know ISIS about for the test or anything. I just want to talk about ISIS. One other thing that results from the two wars is what's called this detention center in Guantanamo Bay. A lot of times when we hear the Guantanamo Bay, we think it's this prison camp. Well, Guantanamo Bay, as it always has been, is still a naval base. It's a military base. But because of the wars on terror back in 2002, 2003, they put these a prison there, not for like Americans or whoever. It's when we capture these extreme terrorists, we put them in these prisons because people don't want them in America. They want them in this camp here. So we hold extraordinary dangerous people in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. We interrogate them, we persecute them. Sometimes we use some people think it's terrorists. Some people think it's like inhumane stuff, like they waterboarded them in the past and so forth to get information out of these terrorists, but some people feel like they should get waterboarded or heavily asked questions. Some people think that shouldn't happen. It just all depends on how you feel about it. There's been controversy over closing it since Bush created it. Once they found out we were doing these harsh methods of interrogation, there was calls to close Guantanamo Bay Detention Center when Bush left office. Obama said he was going to close it, but he still hasn't closed it after 7 years. It's still in operation. But essentially, that's the big controversy over this, is the fact that we're not going to close the base there. We're going to keep the base, but people want to close the detention center there. So that's going to be the end of the first video.